apyayantu mamangani vakpranashchakshushrotramatho balamindriyani cha sarvani sarvam brahma upanishadam maham brahma nirakuryam mama brahma nirakarot anirakaranam astvanirakaranam me astu tadatmani nirateya upanishatsu dharmaste mayi santu te mayi santu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay, so do we have any inquiries, questions, observations, something that was mentioned and yet you felt like it didn't have the chance to be explained well enough? Something that if you were to finish this course and you would say, I wish that was explained a little bit more, I didn't quite capture it. Would there be such an inquiry in you? And if yes, what about?
I have something that I don't really understand. It's about space and time.
Mm-hmm.
The Vijatia Beda. Am I saying it right? That it's under the group of Vijatia Beda?
That's Vijatia Beda, yeah.
Okay. So I don't grab it. I cannot understand it.
Okay, so time and space is within Vijatia Beda, and what you're perhaps asking is why those three categories? What are they about? Or about time and space?
About time and space. I understand the three categories, I think, but I don't understand why time and space are under the group of
Vijatia Beda. Yeah, so first of all, the purpose of that inquiry was to show you that time and space is different from awareness, okay? Because it is a very subtle phenomena, time and space, and the Vijatia Beda was a method how to show you that awareness is not time and space, right? So we had Sajatiya Bheda, okay? We had Vijatiya Bheda, and we have Swagata Bheda. Okay, so these three, all they want to communicate is you can put attributes into these three categories. So we're going to put here attributes, okay? And we had then awareness, which was attributeless. Attributeless. So therefore, attributeless, right? We cannot put into any of these because these are all attributes, okay? So now what is being asked is, right, before we get to time and space, Bheda means difference. So difference, or maybe I'll put direct translation, difference within Sajatiya means, Jatiya is group, Sai means with, that means same group. Okay, so, you know, like anything you can put in the same group. Now you can't put space. See, when we say Sajatiya, it has a left side and a right side. Okay, so this means you're expected to put something on the left side and put something on the right side. But you can put a tree, right, on both sides because you got different types of trees. But can you put space on the left side and the right side? No, why not? Why not? Loud and clear.
All is in space.
All is in space.
Space is not. Space is another.
Good. Good. So all is in space. Anything else you want to say? Loud and clear.
One space.
There's one space. Done. Super. Okay. So if there's one space, then there's no second over here that I can fill up. Okay? So this means one space. So therefore I cannot put space here because you cannot have, space 1 and space 2. If you had space 1 and space 2, then that means they would be separated. But that means they will be separated within space. You see? The only way you can separate two things is, if both things are in space. So this means now there's a third space holding space 1 and space 2. Okay? So it's like this, you have space 1, space 2, right? Two kinds of spaces. Now, what is this which accommodates, right, space 1 and space 2? Oh, space 3. So now the space 3 is different from space 1, different from space 2. So the logic breaks down. You cannot have one space because there is one which accommodates everything, okay? And we also said if it seems like, suppose you object and you say there are two spaces, that is because you're perceiving one space from two different standpoints, like dream space and waking space and whatever other space you can perceive under influence of some liquid, right? Okay? So what about here? Swagata Beda. So Swagata Beda means it has parts. So this means it should be like part 1, part 2, part 3. For example, a cell, right, has 3 parts. It's got, we said, nucleus, we've got mitochondria, and it's got the ribosome. Okay? So many parts make up the cell. Okay? So this means if you take out the mitochondria, then it's no longer a cell, right? Because a cell needs all of the constituents to be one total thing, thus say it's a cell, it's a functional unit. So can we put now space here? So this means that, for example, right, we have total, right, space within this house. And then we say, well, this house is made of hall space, kitchen space, bathroom space. Is that logical to say that? That it's made up of like many spaces? No, because many spaces is only reference to the wall. In fact, all of the thing is within one space. Therefore, can space be a part made up of many parts? Why not? Why can you not make up why can you not put space in Swagata? That means many parts.
Because if you break it into little pieces, it just keeps his name and form.
Okay. Anything else? There's one more logic why you cannot break down space.
If you take one part away of it, it still stays space.
Right. Okay. Keep going. Anything else? Keep going. Something else? Okay. What's the nature of space? Attributeless. Whatever is attributeless, you can't break it down. You can only break down something with attributes. For example, a cell has attributes. It has mitochondria attribute, right? Nucleus attribute. Therefore, you can dissect it. But how am I going to now dissect space now? Can't do it.
A translation for the word attribute or
Feature, characteristic, property.
because in my head there is this distinction between a noun and an adjective. Is there any correspondence in attribute? Because sometimes like wine or whatever, it's a noun. Yeah. If we say space, we cannot give it any characteristic except for.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Good point. It's kind of like both a noun and an attribute, a noun and an adjective.
Yeah.
So space is attributeless. So in that case, I guess you would say, that's a good point actually. So which one should we say to space? Space is attributeless, but this attributeless is both a noun to space. You cannot now define space as attributeless. Space itself is attributeless. So, but you can't say attributeless, like attributeless in reference to what? So you have to say attributeless in reference to space. So space, just like we said Brahman, right? We're not saying, Brahman is big, right? It means big. It comes from B-H-R, brh. Big, Eiffel Tower, big. So this means now the big in reference to Eiffel Tower is adjective. Okay? But Brahman is not an adjective. It is big noun. Okay? So same thing here. Space is not a, when you say attributeless space, that attributeless is not it's not an adjective, it is a noun. Good one. Okay. So therefore, we cannot break down something which is without attributes. So this one is crossed out. Can't put here, can't put here. Now, what about Vijatia Bheda? Vijatia Bheda means, remember, you still have two sides, left side and the right side. So it is Bheda, difference of the same group. Same, so same, sorry, different group. Different group, sorry. V means into pieces, so therefore different groups. Okay, so here you can have, what example do we use for Vijatia Bheda? Tree and animal and human, right? Anything that's two things. So two kinds of different things. One group and another group. So this means tree, right, is unlike animal, okay, in terms of its group, okay? So now, can you say that space is unlike this chair? Can you say space is unlike chair? Yes, why?
You can touch it. It is unlimited. There are no, the chair is in the space.
Yeah, so therefore, right, space has to be free of the chair. Therefore, they're unlike. So space is unlike what it accommodates. So the space is accommodating the chair, and therefore space is unlike the chair. Were the space, right, a chair, then whatever's in space would be just filled with chairs, a lot of places to sit. Okay? Therefore, space can only be in Vijatia Bheda. It is unlike anything else. Okay? Is this making sense so far? Yes. Okay. So now you say, why don't we just go through this analysis? So what? Right? Like, whoa, a lot of academic stuff, right? The reason why is that including space and time, something that is attributeless. Look at this. Something that is attributeless like space and time, you can put into these three categories. You see this? Even though space is attributeless, we were still able to put it into categories of attributes. Follow me? So now, can you put now awareness also is attributeless and accommodates just like space. Exactly the same. So like, isn't then awareness an attribute? Isn't awareness an attribute? And we said, no. And then how do we explain that awareness is not an attribute?
The same like what we just said about space. If awareness had an attribute, then the attribute would be everywhere.
Yeah, in other words, that attribute would be like in your sleep, would be all over the place. It would be constantly in your life. How else did we say that attributeless awareness cannot be put in these three categories? How is awareness, right, not in Vijatia Bheda? Because awareness is, you could say, unlike this chair, right? Awareness lights up. The chair doesn't light up anything, right? Consciousness, in the presence of consciousness, things are recognized. This chair doesn't recognize anything. You can throw it away, nothing changes. So, Awareness is inside Vijatia Beda. How do we come out of this?
Awareness is that which is necessary for all the three categories to be there.
Okay, good. So we said that. Okay, can someone expand on that?
Awareness is always, is there always, even if in a dream, for example, where there is no space, in my opinion.
I think I understand. We have to divide it into concepts, and share them, and ultimately it's we need consciousness. How do you say it? Sentence. The concept cannot exist without consciousness.
Excellent. Okay. So again, all these three categories, okay, they resolve into concepts. Whatever you want to put here resolves into concepts, including time and space. Okay, we've seen how time and space can already be a concept. Space you can keep on dividing, and you've got, kind of like a house. When you were a little child, you perceived space differently than when you go to the same house now and you see it's just one very small house, and yet it was such a huge, spacious house when you were a child. So you can perceive space differently.
Couldn't you say about space and time, by having a beginning and an end, that they have the attribute of limitless? They are limited?
Okay, that makes sense. So what Shan is saying is that because space and time have a beginning and an end, right? They manifest and unmanifest. Their quote attribute would be a sense of limitation, okay? Like anything else. And since everything else you put here will have some limitation, then it will be subject to change. The only difference is whatever you put here, like an apple, or we'll say, a tree, right? Tree, like oak tree and mango tree, they're subject to time itself. Okay? There's change according to time. But you can say the same thing with time itself. But time itself is subject to, not time itself, but, okay, what is time dependent upon? Concepts. Therefore, time itself depends upon manifest, unmanifest, manifest, unmanifest. Okay? So yeah, you're right. So you could put in that sense that space and time come and go. Okay? They end. And therefore, in that sense, they are within these three categories. Because anything in these three categories manifests and unmanifests. But you cannot have awareness manifesting and unmanifesting because it is the permanent substratum which reveals that which manifests and unmanifests.
Is that, can we say the same for Brahma, Ishvara?
For Brahman, as I just said, you cannot say the same for Brahman because it is the substratum which is not subject to manifesting or unmanifesting. Okay? But for its potential manifests, unmanifests. Okay?
Manifest is Ishvara and unmanifest. Or you say Brahman, Ishvara is equal.
So what I'm saying is Brahman, okay, is beyond manifest and unmanifest. It is just permanent. Okay. And its potential, knowledge power, which is Ishvara, that goes through manifest, unmanifest. Okay. But careful, because see, I know how the mind is going to think sometimes. It's going to say, so what? Where does it go when it goes into unmanifest, right? Well, it goes into potential. But potential is nothing but knowledge power. So it's one knowledge power which is either producing an effect like time and space or not producing an effect like time and space. When it produces an effect like time and space, as it's doing right now, welcome to what it's doing right now. You are one of the manifestations of what is happening right now. Then it manifests all of these forms, including time and space. When it doesn't manifest these effects anymore, time, space, and objects, including you right now, then there's no time and space, but the knowledge power remains.
Could you give that same example using the tree and the seed?
Tree and a seed. So in other words, good. So if we have the point of that example of tree and a seed was the seed, right, is always there. It's just there. And that seed, right, has a capacity to hold an entire world in itself, but you don't see it. Now imagine that seed, right? From that seed, that potential manifests, okay? And suppose that seed stays, right? Just suppose that seed stays. And from the seed, the potential manifests into a world. And then suppose now the tree is able to go back into the seed, okay? So the seed, right, the substratum remains, but from the substratum arises the creation, and then creation dissolves. Rises again, dissolves. Now, when it dissolves, can you see the creation inside that seed? You can't see it. And yet, such complex world, such amazing world is right there in that seed. You grind that seed, just powder. Therefore, like this, we cannot see the potential. We can only see the effects. You can only experience the effects. Like the tree, you're now climbing on the tree, build a little house on the tree. You know, you're taking the cherries of the tree, eating, going, So it's got taste, it's got sounds, it's got flavors, it's got color, it's got beauty. All of that is within that intelligence, which is able to manifest that tree. And then one day the tree again just starts to become smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, back into that same seed which nothing happened to it. Just it all resolved into it.
To be specific, it's not produced, it's appearing.
It's appearing, yeah. It's appearing. So it's okay, so now we use the new word, appearing. And this is where seed is no longer going to hold up because, right, it's a seed in a tree, you know, it's manifest. So when you use the word appearance, you have to use different words. And we introduced two words, and we said Brahman, okay, which I equated here to seed, okay? But now you have to cancel this example because it no longer holds up. Why? Because I'm going to add another word here, Vivarta, Upadana, Karana, okay? And another word is, we had Ishvara, which is nothing but knowledge and power, okay? All knowledge and power, which is, remember the word? Parinami. Parinami, Upadana, Karana. Okay. So here we use an example for Ishvara, right? Upadana Karanam means material cause. Okay, so this knowledge is a material cause for the universe. Okay? Some people are writing down. Okay? So this knowledge, all power, becomes the material cause of the universe. And we've already done some examples of this, how you can't really find an atom, right? You can't really find the chair. Okay, you can't really find the wood, right? You can't really find the quark, but what you can find is it all resolves into intelligence. So that intelligence is actually appearing as the quark, appearing as the wood, appearing as the chair, appearing as the, anything else, right? So now when you use the word appear here, so use the word appear, okay? It is an actual change. So here you cannot say quite appearance, you can say it is actually modifying, right? It's actually reorganizing itself. So knowledge power is actually reconstructing, reshuffling itself to manifest as quark, atom, chair, wood, etc. Now you say, can you give me some example for this? We gave an example of clay and pot. Clay pot, or we said plastic and cup, okay? Plastic cup. So if I take a plastic cup right now and I'm bending it and I'm molding it constantly, and I change it into, a bottle, and then I change that somehow into, a statue, So what's happening is the plastic is constantly rearranging itself, okay, to assume a new form, to appear as a new form. So it's actually undergoing change, okay? Knowledge power is actually undergoing change. It's kind of like maybe an example, marbles. Like you have a lot of marbles and they're all the same, okay? And then you just kind of reshuffle those marbles. And you have, some different kind of a, form. And then you reshuffle those marbles. So you're always reshuffling the same knowledge. And yet every time you do, what shows up is a different form. So right now, in your experience, what's actually happening is knowledge power is constantly reorganizing itself to manifest as you as the person. All you're looking at now is knowledge power, intelligence. Really.
It goes so fast. It goes really fast.
It goes so fast that it's giving you like a smooth, but actually it's like frame by frame, right? And it's giving you an appearance of a genuine movie. It's just like you look at a movie on the screen, right? It's just 24 frames per second. Really. And you're totally immersed. You're like, oh, right? And you're having a total experience with it. Now imagine you break that down into frame by frame. Would you respond like that? It'll be a totally different experience, Morita.
Does the spider example apply in this? Or where's the difference?
Okay, I'll put the spider example.
It's a difference, but I don't know.
Yeah, okay, the spider example is meant to show you that it's possible that one cause can be both material and intelligence. Okay? That's a different Upanishad. Okay. Okay, so here the knowledge power actually undergoes change. One more example to help us grasp this a little bit is the dream, right? The dream, your actual mind in the dream is constantly changing. Okay? Your mind is now equated to here, parinami, your mind from which your dream comes. Okay? So your dream comes from your mind. And mind can be now called parinami upadana karanam. In other words, when you dream, the reason why you're able to see movement, characters, crying, emotion, film, everything, is because your mind is actually, memory is actually going through changes. There's actually movement in the mind. But it's all one mind. Okay, it's all one substance called mind, substance called knowledge power, manifesting, rearranging itself to form the dream. But there is one constant in the dream, isn't there? There's one constant. And what is that constant in the dream? I am. Therefore, when it comes to I am, okay, so that constant in your dream, we could say, is this I am, which is vivarta upadana karanam, which is also a material cause, but only seems to be apparently changing. Okay? Not actually changing, because if it was actually changing, then there would be no one constant I am in a dream. Okay? So because your own power is, making so much movement, it seems like you are actually that subject in the dream who's going from one place to the other place. Yeah? It's like this. But you're not actually moving. It's what's moving? Mind is moving. Okay? And because of such intimate connection between these two, knowledge power and I am, it seems like I am is, as a subject, is moving from here to here to here, like that. But nothing's really happening. Because if you were actually changing, if you, the awareful being, were actually changing in the dream, then when you wake up, you will not be the same than when you went to bed. It will be two different people, because the dream would have spoiled you. It would have added a bullet in your head, something. Okay? Therefore, can you see the difference? One is apparently changing, one is actually changing. And that which actually changes does not spoil that which apparently changes. And yet both of them are material cause. So in other words, this knowledge power depends on I am. Okay? Why? Because if you say, what is the entire content of your dream? You can say two things. The content of the dream is knowledge power, and you can also say the content of the dream is I, one awareful being. But the difference between knowledge power is that it actually changes, goes through modifications of manifest, unmanifest, but you do not actually manifest and unmanifest. You remain as I am, I am.
So this process of taking the components of any objects apart is pretty ingenious in the sense of dissolving duality. That kind of helps my mind to really, whatever I see, I can immediately start to see as a non-dual oneness. And just with this concept of concept, could you say that concept equals power intelligence as a construction plan for the whole creation in potential?
Yeah, so knowledge power is a blueprint, is a plan, right? How things are going to work out. So this means before the universe, before the Big Bang even comes, this is amazing, because you just kind of say, "Oh, Big Bang," but right after the universe comes, anything that happens from then on is going to slowly start to evolve in a certain order, a structure. There will be a certain arrangement of gases and particles coming together and forming a gravitational field, and then bacteria will form, etc. So there is already a blueprint already planned out way before the universe came. Okay? Therefore, knowledge power is as though a construction plan, a blueprint for how things will be. Your body was already planned out since beginningless time.
But the reality of that is consciousness.
Of course, because the substance, right, is always consciousness, is from which arises this blueprint for the creation, which means it's the same I am before the universe came.
You say hoe zeg je dat? The design of the body, the human body was there all the way. It's in the blueprint. It only took billions of years to evolve.
Yeah, good. So I know, so it's kind of a contradiction, isn't it? So in other words, it still takes billions of years to evolve. And look at this. Someone's going to argue now, well, in 1 million years, you think a human body is going to look exactly the same? No, it's going to look taller, it's going to look bigger, whatever. So the body is always going through physical evolution, but the basis of 5 senses connected to the mind, the ability to remember, calculate, to emote, that is a blueprint which is beginningless. And that blueprint isn't just for human beings, it is also for a cat. Except the cat has much simpler senses, simpler mind. So that blueprint has been planned out since beginningless time. And therefore, what are you wearing now? A suit of infinite potential, of infinite intelligence. And you're wearing that intelligence right now, looking like your body. So now the person goes, oh, I don't like my body, makeup. You're putting makeup on something that has been designed for billions, trillions, timeless years.
Is it always the same blueprint for all the different universes, or is it?
It's always the same five senses and a thinking mechanism, a memory mechanism, the ahamkara. So even a deva, right, a higher being, will also have a sense of I am. They will also have but however their mind, their capacity to remember will be way more advanced than ours. So they'll be able to calculate amazing numbers, amazing language, amazing linguistics, right? They'll be way more advanced than we can, but still they're ignorant of I am. And the knowledge to discover I am is exactly the same that we're teaching now as would apply to them. As we will see now, it's all going towards this. There are devas coming up who are way above us, and they're also ignorant of I am.
How do you know this all?
Yeah.
How do you know this all? Do you know this all about the devas, for example?
Yeah, so this is one part that you cannot quite prove. You need the authority of the scriptures. Yeah, and also there are some, there's a lot of writings about that there is infinite beings, right, all throughout the universe. Yeah. So this is one of those things that you cannot quite show you. I can't show you, but there are beings all over the place. Yeah. So you have to kind of, open up your mind a little bit that you're the only person here and there's nothing else out there.
I have another question. By breaking down the any object into its components, I remember that we had from the atom to the electrons to the quarks, turning them into energy as a step in between. We didn't mention that here.
Right, so you got, so what, you want to reduce quark further down into...
It's from material to energy to concept to intelligence.
Yeah, so it's still going to be an object within those three categories, Sajatya, Vijatia, Swagata, Beda. So it's still going to have attributes. So whether it is physical matter that you can see under a microscope or subtle matter, it's still going to be matter, right? Something that is subtle. But it's all an effect of knowledge power. Okay, verse 2.5. Iha chet avedit atha satyamasti na chet iha avedit mahati vinashtihi. Bhuteshu bhuteshu vichitya dhiraha pretyasmat lokat amrta bhavanti. So here we want to just point out that, see, after you study this, suppose you ask, when will I know this reality? Right? It's a fair question. When will I actually know it? And it doesn't depend on your effort alone, okay? Because I actually don't know who's connecting to my words, but it's not your effort alone. Otherwise, you could just say like this, I want it to take place right now, and it would happen. But it doesn't happen. So this means there is some intervening factor that is involved, and that is called grace. So this means it is possible to know. Why? Because iha, in other words, in this world, it is possible to know. Why is it possible to know? Because we're not talking about beliefs. We're talking about something that you can demonstrate relatively well. Okay? Therefore, Vedanta becomes knowledge, not a belief. Okay? If I say there is this awareness out there, and you're like, what awareness? Show me. Then that's a belief. But when I talk about awareness as something that you can point now, then it is knowledge. Okay. Therefore, what does knowledge mean? It means that everything that we're speaking of, okay, except a very few things. For example, again, devas, right? Beings that you cannot quite. How are you going to prove that? Honestly. So, see, when we say Vedas, by the way, we call Vedas the sixth sense. Sixth sense means they are a sense which you don't have, and you need them to help you see something that you can't see right now. You can also make some inferences, because 99% of what the Vedas are saying is really nothing but what we've just been teaching, just from different angles. And you can prove it. You can prove, right, presence of awareness, which is sadharana, common. You can prove form. Is form a belief? Not at all. You can observe forms. Is intelligence making that form what it is? Is that a belief? No, because we've just done the analysis over and over again that all resolves into a cause that you can't see. All you can see is an effect. And you can never have an effect without a cause. The potential for the flower to be different tomorrow, is that a belief? No, that is a fact, observable fact. That's called Maya. So Maya is something that we can show, because Maya just means potential for it to be different. Ishvara, intelligence making your body what it is and making the laws what they are. which in whom all of these forms are able to intelligently interact together. Ishvara intelligence is here. Awareness, common I am is also here. Where's the question of belief? Okay? So through this, we can say if Vedas are indeed speaking about something that I can directly experience, prove, then there are few things, in fact, there's only two things that you cannot quite demonstrate, which is, as I said, devas and reincarnation. You cannot quite directly, right, say it's like this. But there is a lot of logic to show you that there is a continuity of life. And I've done this in Tattva Bodh. I don't think I'll do it here. Okay? Therefore, what Vedanta is talking about is what's here and now. So if you are connecting to these realities that I just spoke of, awareness, Maya, Ishvara, and forms, and how these forms are reconciled. Again, listen, how do you reconcile awareness, Ishvara, in other words, intelligence, potential, and form? Can you reconcile them now? If I were to give you a presentation and I say, 5 minutes to demonstrate. I'm not actually going to put you to the stage, but could you do that, considering everything we've been given? Don't even shake your head, because then I'm going to say, okay, cool, come. Maybe we should, right? This is the kind of feedback I got in India. I said, hey, why don't we just get up and do a presentation for 5 minutes? Monita's shaking her head. Okay, so if we finish early, then I will make it very simple and non-confrontational for us to do 5 minutes of, to give you some, some work. Yeah. So you've been relaxing there for too much. Yeah. And I know it's, heart starts to beat and all this nonsense, which I get still nowadays. Even when I come down, I'm like, the moment you start, it's gone. So I get that, but it helps you so much when you're coming up. That's what Nima did. She said, come up. I was always the first person. And yeah. And it's embarrassing, right? So I'm like, oh, I made a mistake and I don't want them to think that I'm, stupid. So all of this nonsense crosses your mind. But, once you go through it, it just changes you so much. It's like 20 years of work, just healed, just coming up and saying something. So there's great healing in making yourself kind of uncomfortable, right? Yeah. So it's a great opportunity to do that.
So maybe a stupid question, but you said Brahma, Ishvara, and then?
I said Brahman, so that's awareness, Ishvara, Maya, and form. Okay. So now if I gave you 5 minutes presentation and just say, talk about it and resolve all of them, right? What are they talking about? How do they all relate to our experience? Give some examples to demonstrate them and resolve them ultimately into awareness. Okay, Chet iha na avedit mahati vinashtihi. So this is still 2.5. So if you don't know reality, it is a great loss. In other words, if you don't know these four, it is a great loss. Why? Because you're given a sophisticated instrument all this time and it wasn't used what it could have been used for. In that sense, it becomes a great loss because there's no distance between the reality and you. If awareness was on the moon, then it's understandable. I couldn't go to the moon. I didn't have enough money in this life. I couldn't purchase a ticket. But because the reality is right here, in that case, it becomes a great loss. Because you didn't have to pay. You didn't have to pay to discover awareness. You only had to think, which was given to you. Okay? In that sense, it's a loss. Now, what kind of mistakes make it a loss? Well, some of them are you have to do something to discover the reality. This is a common thing in the world of anywhere. You have to do something, And how does Vedanta start? Vedanta starts by asserting that your I is mixed with the body and mind. And thereby, we start to look at ourselves as a limited being, and we start to have a certain complex about that. And to relieve my complex, to make it temporarily subside, then I will go into the world and apply action. What kind of action? Time-bound action. Because if I do 1 hour worth of action, it is not 2 hours worth of action. 2-hour meditation is never a 3-hour meditation. 24-hour meditation is never a 25-hour meditation. So just because every action is limited, by definition, it has to give you a correspondingly limited result. That's just logic. Therefore, if you get, for example, 1 hour of crystal healing or tectonic plate, tachyons, right? So you get 20 minutes of tachyon healing, then you will get maybe 5 hours worth of tachyon influence, right? Now, if you have, who knows, if you try 20 hours of tachyon healing, maybe you will blow up. We don't know. I don't think she hasn't done that. But you will get some kind of a result. Now, that's fine, right? We're not saying don't dismiss it. There's nothing wrong with spiritual things, of this and that nature. We just want to show that the nature of any action is going to always give you a limited result. Even if you remove a lifetime phobia, which is great, but from whom has the lifetime phobia been removed from? The limited individual. So this means the limitation has stayed either way. So this means Vedanta is not saying that these are useless, but they have a certain limitation. Thus, there's an intelligent use, but not getting too lost in them, because they're going to retain your jiva atyasa. They're going to retain your superimposition as a small individual. Okay? Therefore, common spirituality, what it does is it looks at the individual, the limited being, and it gives it something. Do this. And then what does this do? It relieves this limited individual for 1 day. It gives them some feeling for 1 day. But it retains the limited individual. Whereas Vedanta says the limited individual has the capacity to remove the sense of limitation. Because your nature is already limitless. So there's nothing that you can do to gain limitlessness. Because anything you do is going to be limited. Limited action plus limited action plus limited action for 1,000 years plus limited action equals limited result. Therefore, the only thing you can do is to discover through a certain methodology that which I already enjoy is limitless. That means it is already available right here, right now. And I just have to remove the ignorance which is denying me from recognizing my sadharana, my common presence. Okay? So yes, there is doing in reference to discovering, like sitting down, booking a ticket, coming here. But while you're listening, are you doing anything while you're listening? Are you saying, okay, now that this information is coming into my mind, I'm gonna remove my ignorance in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, boom, gone. Right? Even if you did that, it wouldn't work. So in other words, you have to expose your ears and wait. Right? And wait and think. And just thinking slowly, right, removes these notions. So when it comes to discovering your limitlessness, it's not a matter of action, but a matter of removing those notions which are denying me from thinking that I am some object. Okay? What about grace?
Where the grace comes in.
As we said, grace is a product of your sincere effort to sit down and want to ascertain what is being said. We said Shravanam is tatparya nishchaya. I'm sitting down with the specific intention that this becomes a living reality. It's an intention. Like, I want this to take place for me. So that intention, ongoing intention, through listening, through repeated meditation, through sincere efforts, through dharma, through values, in that sense, you are graced, little by little by little by little. So ultimately, Ishvara removes that veil. And you never know when that's going to happen. Ultimately, Ishvara blesses you with the knowledge. And why does Ishvara bless you with the knowledge? Because your efforts have been keeping with what is to be done to remove ignorance. Your efforts were keeping with the pramana. And the pramana's job is meant to bless you, meant to give you grace. Okay?
Ishvara is doing that to the guru.
Yeah, so Ishvara needs, vocal cords, needs needs a tongue, needs teeth to smile, needs etc. Right? And then more vocal cords, communicate. So it's a vocal cord exchange, parampara. Okay, so that's how it is. You just need some dynamic instrument. Yeah. Okay. So the other mistake that one can make is to say that one day I will understand Ishvara. One day I will understand God. Think about this. One day I will understand the big picture. What does this mean?
Postponing.
Yeah, you're postponing, and you're also making Ishvara into a object within time and space. And yet I can only have that desire because Ishvara is right here, right now, allowing me to, putting my cells together, putting my brain cells together to form that thought. You're not putting your 20 million brain cells together. It's all happening on its own. That is Ishvara. Therefore, Ishvara is not something to be understood in the future. It is because of which this mechanism is able to think and contemplate and ask and smile and feel right now. So therefore, Ishvara is right now in your body. One doesn't have to go to the Himalaya to discover God. It is in my very own body. Expressing as my body. It's actually a manifestation of Ishvara. Like a metaphor. We have ocean and we have a wave. And a wave thinks, one day I have to find the ocean. Right? The wave is within the ocean. The wave has no reality without the ocean. The wave was never apart from the ocean. The wave just has to understand I am a wave because I am a manifestation. I as a person am a manifestation of the ocean. I am a manifestation of Ishvara. Right now, the listener and the speaker are manifestations of Ishvara. The only difference is between the guru and someone who is yet to understand, which I'm not saying who does or doesn't, who is yet to understand is they're both manifestations of Ishvara. That means they're both waves in the ocean, except one wave, called the guru, understands that my truth as a wave and the entire ocean, including the student, is water.
And water is Brahman. The ocean is Ishvara and water is Brahman.
Good. So the jiva is the wave, the ocean is Ishvara, and the water, the one commonality between both of them, which they both enjoy, is Brahman. Okay? That is the only difference between a guru and one that is yet to understand and wants guru's knowledge. That's all there is to it. Okay? One unity because of which everything is. One content because of which the whole thing is manifesting and changing.
Could you repeat that? Ocean and
So the example given was that it was a metaphor to show you that the difference between the guru, which is a wave, and a student, another wave, they're both accommodated, they're both within one ocean. They're both enjoying their beingness as a form in one ocean. So the guru is not the whole ocean, neither is another student the whole ocean. So there's a difference, isn't there, between the wave and the ocean. So the wave cannot say, I am the ocean, because the wave is limited knowledge, limited power, whereas the ocean is limitless knowledge, limitless power, in whom all waves obtain. Therefore, the Guru understands that my truth as a wave and the truth of Ishvara, the truth of the ocean, is one, which is the water in this case, compared to Brahman. And how is that Brahman known to both the Guru and the student? How is that Brahman directly known? How is the content of the whole thing known directly to the Guru and the student? I am, I am, I am. The only difference is Guru understands the I am is the truth of the whole thing, but the student's I am is still confused within the form. Another mistake is to say Ishvara is all this. Uh-oh. Ishvara is all this. They're still writing. I just want to make sure everyone captures this. So far we've been saying Ishvara, all that is here is Ishvara. Okay? All that is here is ocean. Now I'm saying one of the big mistakes is to say all that is here is ocean. Think about it. That means the criminal is now the ocean. That means all of the bad stuff is also Ishvara. That means all of the evil is also Ishvara. So this means we have to resolve this. In other words, we have to understand the relationship between all this and Ishvara. And what is the relationship between all this? The person, the thoughts, the saintly thoughts, the criminal thoughts, and Ishvara? Satya, Mithya. While Mithya has no reality apart from Satyam, Satyam is independent of Mithya. So how to show this, for example? Suppose right now, listen please carefully, you're experiencing sadness. There's sadness, a sad feeling down. And suppose 100 neurons in your brain are coming together to aid this feeling of sadness. 100 cells. Which cell is sad of those 100? So if I start looking at those individual cells, can I find sadness? And yet when 100 cells come together, what do I find? Sadness. So now if I take one of those cells and I break it down further, does the molecule that makes up the cell, does that have sadness? So in other words, 100 cells comes together, there's sadness. If you take one of those cells out, no sadness. Take another cell out, no sadness. Take all of them individually out, no sadness. And then I break down one neuron and I look into the atom structure. Can I find sadness there? What about the quark? What about the concept? Is the concept sad? And yet, when I arrange them together, 100 of non-sad neurons come together and they form sadness. What does this mean? In other words, the structure upwards. In other words, the wood, just like the wood is free of the chair, the atom is free of the wood. The quark is free of the atom. Concept is free of the quark, the atom, the wood, the chair. The concept is free of the whole thing. So even though concept manifests as the whole thing, the quark, the atom, the molecule, the neuron, the 100 neurons, all across knowledge remains completely free of all that it manifests. Just like the wood remains free of the chair, the atom remains free of the wood. The quark remains free of the atom and the wood and the chair. Concept remains free of quark, atom, wood, chair. Concept remains free of neuron, 100 neurons, sadness, and whatever other emotion. So what I want to show is simply, just simple, down to earth, is knowledge power is the content of all things, the substance of all things. But because all things have a satya mithya relationship to knowledge and power, it means knowledge and power is free of all concepts, all ideas, all thoughts of doing something bad, of doing something good. So on one hand, all that is here is Ishvara, but on the other hand, don't turn this and say, oh, this means Ishvara is an evil entity, is a benign entity. Okay? Ishvara has nothing to do with anything. It just supplies its knowledge power, and by it coming together, at every assembly upwards, there's a new attribute that forms. Quarks come together and they form an atom. It's a new attribute. It's a brand new creation. Atoms come together, they create molecules. It's a brand new creation. Molecules come together, they create cells. It's a brand new creation. Cells come together, suddenly sadness comes, it's a brand new creation. And yet, underneath I can't find sadness. Underneath I can't find neuron. Underneath I can't find atom. Underneath I cannot find anything except knowledge power.
So it depends then on who is at that moment manipulating what you have as building blocks, like to be evil or to be benign. Then depends how you're gonna do it or what you choose to do it. And then you can do, and still you are Ishvara in essence, or you using with the power of Ishvara in you. You are at that moment arranging all the building blocks.
You're arranging one building. You're arranging one knowledge power manifesting as one neuron and another neuron and another. You're bringing it together. It's all being brought together to create emotion of sadness. And yet the whole thing, knowledge power remains free of the whole thing because it's a satya mithya relationship. So yes, by your own free will, you're able to generate whatever. You can generate depression like that. Just keep on thinking how nothing's working in my life. Keep on adding those thoughts. Nothing's working, nothing's working, nothing's working, nothing working, nothing working. And it generates a certain sequence of thoughts and you're like, oh my God, nothing's working, I'm depressed. But it doesn't make concepts, it doesn't make Ishvara depressed. Otherwise the whole world will become depressed.
My mind is doing strange things, I think, but can we see all knowledge, all power as one big blueprint, how it should be? But
Yes, one big blueprint, which when through your free will, you can cause it to rearrange itself and produce depression or cheerfulness. That means you collapse possibilities. In quantum physics, we have collapsing possibilities. Through your free will, you collapse possibility to experience cheerfulness, which is nothing but knowledge and power. Through your free will, which is nothing but knowledge and power, you collapse the possibility to experience, some sad emotion.
But it was not a purpose from the beginning.
There was no beginning, therefore the jiva always had a choice through what information they had at the time to make a decision or a lack of an informed decision. So what we're experiencing now as human beings, it's always been like that. Because we've always been given the same free will and always been given the environment, and there were always conflicts and we always had to work through them. But we were using our free will to take advantage of knowledge and power to cause it to rearrange itself in a form of sadness. So knowledge power just supplies itself and allows you to experience sadness. Knowledge power supplies itself and it lets you experience cheerfulness. And who collapses that potential to rearrange knowledge and power, to rearrange God? You do. Free will. God was never punishing you or rewarding you. You were saying, God, please manifest as sadness or depression in my mind. God, please manifest as cheerfulness in my mind. And God just manifests as that. It was never about God being out there who is, giving you a hard time. It was always in you that you had control all along.
And one jiva collapsing the potential in order to create cheerfulness, and the other jiva is creating sadness, depends on the limited knowledge they have.
Good. In other words, both jivas, now that also depends on what punya, right? How much punya them have. And therefore, you can have two jivas, and one of them knows more, and one of them knows less. And you can only collapse based on what you know. So your free will becomes limited the less you know, and becomes wider the more you know. So free will itself is based on variables of how much I know. This is why education is so important.
And so it's not good and bad, it's just limited knowledge or ignorance on one side and not.
Yeah. And the one who is given limited knowledge has the potential to expand their knowledge. So you see, this is why we say God is, like the coolest thing ever, because He was always giving you the chance to collapse all of these beautiful things that matter to you. And you always thought, no, I'm being punished, no, it is this condition, no, it is that condition. But you always have a choice. You always have a choice. There is always something, little something that you can do. No matter how small, there is little something that you can do. And God just supplies that to you. He just gives that to you. Another mistake that we can make is we can say liberation is experiencing something new or different. This is a big one. It used to be big in the 1960s and 70s. I don't know how big is it today, but I do know older times. And suppose that the ocean, which is not ignorant about its nature, that means Ishvara is not ignorant about its nature, shows the wave that there is one more reality called water. Does the wave have to get rid of itself and the ocean to know the water? Not at all. Does the wave have to disappear into oblivion to come in contact with the water? Nothing changes. The whole thing is sopadika thyasa. In other words, when I discover what was already there, you're like, I haven't produced anything. Nothing was produced. It just came to fruition. Like, gravity. It was there all along, just waiting to be discovered. And because you don't produce anything, it's a very humbling thing. Like, awareness of this common presence, that's the real I. I always knew about it. Therefore, the wave has no experience. It's just very humbling. Wow. So that's the final reality. Therefore, the wave undergoes no particular change at all, because it was already the reality all along. Nothing's changed. It was water while it was struggling to discover the water. It is water now, having discovered that it's the water. The whole thing was water all along, except in the stage of ignorance, it carried the notion that the water was something away, an image. And so it was as though separate from itself, because it was pushing water inside a bubble of its own doing, of its own making. And now that bubble has popped, and what is here is just seen. Wow. So the only thing that was denying me from recognizing the water is my own walls that I created, my own pratibhasika. That's the only thing standing in between. And yet I was that all along. And now the bubble is popped. And the wave goes, I haven't gained anything. I've just discovered what I was all along. And thus the wave lives out its life until the end, and one day it falls. And when the wave falls, it never again comes back as another wave. It remains as both the water and the ocean. You remain as both Brahman and Ishvara. Therefore, you remain as the cause of the universe, in whom everything is still moving, shaking and baking, dancing, and you remain as one limitless being, resting in eternity as yourself, as the limitless one. And that is what this whole journey is about.
When you look at it, right now an army of waves is trying to conquer the other side of the ocean and fight against the other army of waves. It's so insane and sad.
Right? Yeah. One army of waves is trying to conquer another army of waves. So the whole ignorance produces this divine display, display of dance, which is eternal since beginningless time, one against another, one against another. And it's always been going on like that and will continue to go on like that until one life you say, I choose to just get out of that. Not that I'm going to get out of anything, I just choose to change the status quo. I choose to change my identity from the wave to the whole ocean. And how long were you a wave? Since how long were you a wave? Does the wave ever begin in the ocean? Do you ever have sunny, perfect still ocean, sunny, a wave comes? Wherever there is ocean, that's exactly where the wave is. That's just the nature of it. In that same way, the jiva always was existing as a wave. One individual. And then Guru wave comes over and says, solves the problem, and then you enjoy your last few days. You got a few options. In fact, you got two options. You can either teach this tradition because you are so indebted to how much the knowledge has done for you, or you can just live out your life to the rest of your life, however you wish. Those are basically the only two options. Okay? And chapter 3 will come tomorrow. Okay, we're going to finish this. Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Avashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.